Good afternoon. Welcome to Parent University. My name is Grace Valenzuela. I am the Director of Communications and Community Partnership for the district. And it's a pleasure for us to host. And we are planning our next year's sessions. So if you have ideas, when we send you the evaluation for the event that you attended, please, if you have ideas of what you want to see, because what we're finding out is that parents love to have that conversation, with other parents and learn about different issues and how they deal with different issues. So there's really that natural exchange, a natural way that we can be a community ourselves. And speaking of community, this is one workshop that we thought that it is really about how do we navigate a multicultural community. How do we enter conversations with people who are different from us? How do we do those, and be comfortable with it, right? So, and with that, I'm going to introduce to you our presenter for the evening. Annie O'Brien is a children's book author, illustrator, and she does multicultural children's books. And with that, she's all Peaks Island, so she's a person who lives here.
Good evening. I sort of feel like I don't need this, but we have a video, so we're going to use it. So the first thing I'd like you to do, to invite you to do, is to introduce yourselves. And if you're all on one side, maybe some of you want to come around the other side so you can have a conversation. And it's just going to be a quick introduction for now. We left a sheet on your table of what we're asking each person to do to go around.
Up with some questions as we go. Actually, I went here as a kid to present stuff. Yeah. A bunch of our principal went to present stuff. So really? Surprising. Probably not. I speak a little. So I speak Spanish. I am a parent. I have 2 boys, 16 and 14. And I work
And I'll give you a little bit of a sense of what we're going to try to do this evening. The first thing that we decided might be useful is to have a little bit of highlights of what we're finding from neuroscience and psychology about how our brains work around this connecting across differences. So I'll share just a little bit for you to be thinking about racial identity development and implicit bias. And then we're gonna, and in the midst of that, I'm gonna ask you to do a little sharing. Then Grace and I are gonna do a little bit of role play to throw some more ideas into the compost pile here that we're creating. And then we're going to have a panel. There are 5 language facilitators from Portland Public Schools, current or past, who have joined us and we're going to have a chance to hear from them. And then you'll have more time to share at your tables. And the whole idea here is for us to begin to identify what are the obstacles to creating authentic multicultural community in Portland and Greater Portland and Southern Maine, and what are some examples of things that are going well. So that, and we'll be moving towards, in those sharing circles at the end, an opportunity for you to each think about what are a few small steps I could take next. So first of all, racial identity development. So I'll start by answering these questions. My name is Ann Sibley O'Brien. Everyone calls me Annie. And I was born in Chicago, then moved to New Hampshire until I was 6, at which point our entire family moved around the world to South Korea, where I was raised from then on. I speak English and fluent conversational Korean. I'm a parent, I'm an educator, I'm a community member. And when I when I reflect on that experience of moving from New Hampshire, where nobody noticed what I looked like in the 1950s, late 1950s, to South Korea in 1960, which felt like someone turned on a spotlight, and all of a sudden I was noticed every day. And my difference, highly privileged, high status, but minority identity, was pointed out to me every single day. So what psychologists tell us about how racial identity and all other kinds of identity are formed is that it is from the mirrors that are held up for us when we're very young. So it's the things that people say to you, it's the way that people respond, it's what you observe in your families and the community around you, where people tell you. Another way that I've seen psychologists phrase it is, what is made salient for you? What is your attention called to? And you gradually learn who you are in relation to your family, in relation to the community, in relation to the larger world. So when I got to Korea, I switched from being a member of a majority group in the US to a member of a very small minority group. And all of a sudden, my mirrors changed, and I became highly conscious of being, it was American was what people said, but it meant white. If I'd been Black American, they wouldn't have used the same term. So that that had a huge impact on the formation of my racial identity. So the first thing I'd like to ask you to do is find a partner, and Nanette's going to step in to make our numbers even there. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes each. And I'd like you to think about, just very briefly, what's the first time you can remember noticing race, as in your race is different from other people's, or someone else's was different from yours. Actually, then she could, yeah. You want to sit there? She's a plant to make it. So again, the question is, at this moment, what's the earliest recollection you have of noticing race, ethnicity, cultural differences? And how old were you? What happened? And what did you notice? How did it feel? Who said what? So I'm going to call out. So the first person will have 2 minutes to tell their story while their partner listens, and then the other person will have 2 minutes to tell their story. And this is just to get your attention on it. It's nowhere near enough time to really tell the story. But just to begin to think, what was my racial story? What were the mirrors being held up for me? Okay? So find a partner, and it'd be great if you can partner with someone you don't know well.
What she was wondering is, not only and she was wondering how they were.
So let me get a sense. What was the memory? How old were you? Anyone? How old were you when you had this experience that you remembered this evening? 14. Okay. Anyone? 30. 13. 13. There are people who are, definitely I've had people say college before they were aware. 13, what else?
9 or 10.
9 or 10? Yeah. 5? Yeah. 5 and 8. Okay, great. One of the things we're learning from neuroscience is that children do see racial difference at least by the age of 6 months, but they often don't have the language for it. And especially in majority communities, people don't usually talk about racial and cultural differences as much. So children may not have a way of articulating what they notice, but they definitely know by the time they're, well, from those doll studies, are people familiar with? By the time that children are 3 or 4 years old, they know which group it's better to belong to, which is the more high status and more privileged group. They know that already. So this idea that children don't see race is actually not accurate according to neuroscience, the data that we have. So how many of you remembered a story that was pleasing to recall, fun or positive? Interesting. Okay. And how many remembered something that was uncomfortable? Okay. So another question I have for you. One of the most important things that I think that racial identity development theory can focus on for us is the difference between majority identity and minority identity. So how many of you, when you were young, were growing up in an area where most people looked like you blended in? Raise your hand. Now look around. Keep your hands up a minute and look around. Because one of the things that's most interesting is that I would venture to say a majority of immigrants and refugees came from majority cultures, came from places where they were majority. And then, as I was saying in my story as a child, with very different outcomes, arrive in a country like the US and are suddenly given minority status, which is a very odd thing. And then the children are raised with a minority identity that the parents don't have, which is a whole different dynamic. So the thing about majority identity is that you blend in, you don't stand out, and most of the time people aren't bringing your racial or cultural ethnic identity to your attention because everybody's like that, right? So my Korean friends weren't being told every day, or weren't out on the streets hearing every day, you're Korean, you're Korean, you're Korean, because that was the norm. It was expected. And as a result, that part of your identity tends to become assumed and somewhat invisible, and often there's silence around it. If you have a minority identity, everybody's telling you all day long that you're different. So what that does is highlight that piece of your identity, and it becomes very significant often to how you see yourself. I think that that's a really significant piece to understand as we're having conversations about race and culture and ethnicity and about navigating differences, because our experiences are so different, it really affects conversations. One of the things that you hear a lot in US conversations about race is complaints by white people about people of color playing the race card. Like, why are you bringing race into this? And that's a perfect example of the misunderstanding between being a member of a majority group and a member of a minority group. Because, of course, for folks of color in the US, the race card is getting played every minute of every day. And race, it's perfectly clear from the experience of people of color that race matters all the time and is part of everything. And it's only majority people who see that, who don't see that because they're not having that experience. So that's just one piece to think about as we navigate across differences and thinking about your students, or your children, the children in your community. What's their experience? And how is it related to their classmates? And how does that play out in terms of who's seen as different and how they're treated? So another piece that we're getting really interesting information about from neuroscience is implicit bias or unconscious bias. And I had the privilege a number of years ago of hearing a speaker at Bates College. The talk was called Your Brain on Bias. And it was really a huge shift for me in terms of my thinking and my understanding. And her name is Mahzarin Banaji, and she's one of the leaders of one of the founders and directors of the Implicit Project at Harvard University, where they have tested online millions of people for all kinds of bias. And it's projectimplicit.org, and you can go and take the tests. And they don't just focus on race and ethnicity, but I found those results to be really fascinating. I don't know if this was worldwide or just in the US, but they've tested people all over the world. Mahzarin Banaji said that that white people test 70 to 80% positive for white bias. And what do you think about in the US about people of color? How would you think they would test? So positive for white bias means that it's a rapid fire, or it's a series of questions in which you're making associations. And the idea is, if you do it quickly, then that's the association you have. And then they flip it. So for instance, the first thing, they give you white faces and positive words. You're supposed to match those. And faces of people of color and negative words, and you're supposed to match those. So if you were able to do that quickly, and then when they flip it and put positive words with people of color and so-called negative words with white people, that would show that you had white bias. Does that make sense? So what do you expect that the results would be for people of color? Any guesses? So it's actually about neutral, because if you could say the natural tendency for people to feel comfortable with and what we call prefer your own kind is overridden by cultural dominance of whiteness in the US. So white bias affects everyone. So one of the way that she explained it, and again, I'm an artist, not a scientist, but as I understood her, we all have in our brains two functions that contribute to this. One is sorting, and apparently our brains all day long are taking notes and dividing our experiences and our encounters by whether it's familiar or unfamiliar. So like me, not like me, same, different, familiar, unfamiliar. And there's no judgment there, but the brain just does it. You can't stop the brain from doing that. The judgment comes in when we start making associations. And that's where things like the dominant culture have a huge impact. And the thing that I was so struck by is the thing about implicit bias is you absolutely don't know it's there. So it's not what we think, what we believe, what we intend, or what we mean. And in fact, it's often and maybe usually the opposite. How many of you have ever heard of that study they did of master teachers? They were investigating gender bias in teaching. This was around, I think it was late 20th century, in the 90s. And what they were trying to test was how often teachers called on boys and on girls. And their subjects were teachers who were absolutely committed to equity and believed that they were being fair and intended to be. And what do you think the results of the study showed? Of course, that teachers call on boys more than on girls. So that's an example where it's not what teachers believed, not what they intended, not what they meant, not what they wanted to do, and yet the unconscious bias leaks, and it controls many of our actions. And if you've ever had a sense that what you intended is not what your impact was, that's a place where unconscious bias can be showing. What I thought the great news about this was, we can actually affect this by what we feed our brains. So our brains can only form biases in the direction we want or the direction we don't want based on what the incoming is. So if you live in the US and you have a standard American diet of media and books and who you, especially as a white person, if the people you associate with and the people who come to dinner at your house all look like you, your brain can't do anything with that, no matter how well-intentioned you are, except create white bias. And the same thing would go for other groups, except that you don't have, white bias is supported by the dominant culture. One of the things we can do is affect our brains by what we read. So one of the things we can do is to read the world we want. Take a look at what you feed your brain and make sure it looks like the world that you're hoping to build, the way you want to express yourself, the way you want to be in the world in community, because that's what your brain is working with. The other thing that can really help is contact, like this, conversations like this. So one of the things that I've learned about in my association with Dr. Krista Aronson at Bates College is the phenomenon of intergroup anxiety. So when we encounter someone new, universally human beings often feel nervous. Can I connect with this person? When a person appears to be quite different from us. We wonder if we'll have anything in common. Will we understand each other? Will I do or say something offensive? Is that person possibly dangerous to me because of things that that person has come to believe about members of my group, etc. There are all kinds of reasons. And when we don't interrupt that with contact, that creates a ground for prejudice to develop. And contact, when you read books, and especially books that show positive interactions across difference, and this is powerful for work with children, you're giving the brain new information. And the child absorbs the idea that, oh, people in my group are friends with people in the other group, and that that lowers their intergroup anxiety and hence their prejudicial attitudes. And that's called vicarious contact because it's through a book. This is what we're doing tonight, and what we hope to do and spread throughout the southern Maine is direct contact. And that can really make the difference in the information that your brain gets and what then it produces and what will leak. Okay. See if I forgot anything that I thought was really important to say. So I talked about in racial identity development, I talked about mirrors, and to me implicit bias is like lenses. It's a pair of spectacles that you're wearing, but you have no idea they're there. And you think you're seeing clearly when in fact the lenses are distorting what you experience. So that's a really great thing to keep in mind as we're interacting with each other. What kinds of assumptions am I making that I may not even be aware of? What kinds of early experiences, like the thing you shared? A wonderful thing to do about your early experience is to begin unpacking what was my experience of racial, cultural, ethnic identity development. What happened to me? And what assumptions did I absorb? What conclusions did my young self develop from those experiences? And how is that playing out in my relationships today? It's very rich material. And sometimes I've done a lot of this and discovered, oh, that's probably not a great assumption to have hiding in there if I'm trying to build authentic relationships across differences. So what we'd like to do now is, we're on first. Then the panelists will be next. We're going to ask the five of you to come up here, and I just have some questions for you after this.
Just so you know.
Okay.
So we're going to do a role play. and just watch the interaction, and then we'll get your feedback afterwards. I'm not going to give you a lot more than that.
And Grace and I are not family members as we actually are. We're playing community members who don't know each other well. Hello, Ms. Valenzuela.
Oh, you
Hi.
can call me Grace.
Oh, thanks, Grace. I'm Annie.
Grace.
Yeah. So my grandson is turning 4 and having his birthday party, and I notice he loves to play with your niece at preschool. So could you bring your niece to his birthday party? He'd be so excited.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. Thank you very much for the invitation.
What's going on? What we want to draw your attention to is what we're actually saying and what might be going on in our minds.
So, turn and talk. What's going on in our minds is the question.
I want to
My daughter to son's birthday. And she doesn't say from my way that
Annie was talking that she assumed that Grace would understand her, like she was like talking kind of loud.
So interesting to see what you're going to come up with. This is what happens a lot when we start crossing cultures, when we start reaching out to other people, when we are not certain about what to do and how to do that, but we always have something going on behind our heads. And what's behind our heads is the most important thing to unpack. Okay, so let's talk about what came up for you. So what was going on in the head of Annie? Anyone?
Nervous. She was nervous.
She was trying to figure out how to ask.
Right.
So Annie was trying to figure out how to do this. She was nervous.
I thought I saw the nervousness on Grace's part here. I thought Annie was courageous and she was ready to approach and interact, but Grace was not.
Okay. Other thoughts?
So you said Grace was nervous?
Grace was reserved and shy and
Apprehensive.
nervous. Yeah.
Non-committal.
so you had some doubts, didn't you? So that's, yeah, so that's why you said that thank you, but you did not accept the invitation.
I did not accept it.
And I was going to say also, you did not properly excuse yourself out to say, because of that reason we're not coming, or thank you for inviting, but you should have followed up with, we are coming.
I did not affirm that we are going to go to the party. Thank you for the invitation. Josephine.
You can just repeat it.
Maybe Grace didn't think it was a genuine reason, a genuine invitation.
Other thoughts?
I'm wondering if Grace's niece's experience of the interaction is not the same as Annie's.
Ooh, nice.
Other thoughts? And we chose this one because this is the most common thing that happens for that we often get invited to birthday parties. What else could
Well,
be
one of the
going-
things that we
talked about briefly here was that in a lot of cultures, they don't celebrate birthdays. So that immediately introduced an awkward situation.
What else is there in the birthday celebration that happens with kids in this culture?
Gifts.
There's a gift giving. So in my head, I gotta get a gift. I have limited resources.
I don't know what to get.
I don't know what to get.
You don't want your child to come to a party with a gift that's going to be judged by other kids.
Absolutely, absolutely, right? Because you open presents here, right? In my culture, we don't. In front of the person who gave the gift. Josephine.
The friendship between parents. In our culture, you don't send your child to someone that you don't know.
Just the child, right? So the invitation is usually to a family. So everybody goes. So if you are, so if my daughter has a birthday celebration, a birthday party, I invite all the parents. So it's not me babysitting your kids. You are there as well, and you're going to have not just cake and ice cream, it will be a feast.
Can I just say one quick thing, Grace?
That's my culture.
I've learned something here now. That I guess I assume personally, to be honest with you, and I'm sure a lot of parents would assume from my culture, there's people who don't celebrate birthdays. If you go to a birthday party, the close friends or family members who give their birthday gifts, but you're just out there to celebrate and have fun. So if I send my child up, until now I didn't know it, just that go eat some cake and have fun. Yeah. So, but now I'm learning. Probably messing up quite a bit already.
Life is all about messing it up. So what else? Annie, what is going on in your head?
Why was I nervous? Exactly. Oh my goodness, this is so packed and fraught, right? I'm so white right now. I have no idea what to do. And then I feel sort of stopped, like, oh my goodness, I really did. I have no idea what I did, but clearly it didn't go right. I'm also noticing from all this, I'm learning too here, so many assumptions, right? You're coming with your lens of how birthdays are done in the US with not a clue about what I might be burdening this person I'm hoping to connect with, in what ways I might be making it difficult.
I think the pause. There's the pause, right? It's the pregnant pause all the time that happens in conversation when you're really like thinking about what you're going to say and you do not want to make a mistake. So that's going on in my head as well as Annie. And it's impolite to, I'm thinking, oh, I can't come, I cannot tell her that it's about the gifts, I cannot tell her it's about, so there's just that. And then as you notice the conversation, what happened to the conversation? Stopped. It was awkward, right? And how many times have we felt that? So this is sort of like just an example of all the time what happens when we start building connection. But we're not going to make sure that you don't think that we have to end the conversation at that moment. But we're just wanting for you to think about what are those assumptions or things that are going behind our head when we encounter cross-cultural connections.
And I think the most important thing is what happens next. I would say the vast majority of the time, that's it, right? Everybody retreats to their corners, embarrassed or bewildered, or it's like, ooh, that was kind of a bite. I don't think I'll try that again. And the conversation never continues. So one of the questions tonight is, how do we continue those conversations? How do we unpack what happened so that we have some clues for maybe doing it better the next time?
Maybe this is also a good time for you to think about, and just a moment in your team, in your group, to think about what other situations have you found yourself in, and then somebody just make notes of those, because we're going to want to talk about it, and bring those up. So just turn in your groups, what other situations other than birthday parties that you find yourself in a place of awkwardness.
One other thing that occurred to me about my role in this, in the skit, was I appreciate Mahmoud, your thinking it was generous, but it occurred to me, or courageous, that I was thinking that I was being generous and doing the right thing and making an overture. What I was actually doing was I was standing over here and asking Grace to come to where I was, with no awareness, not a clue that that's what I was doing. So that instead of being welcoming and, my intentions were good. But as we learn with implicit bias, the impact matters more than the intention. That's what we want to make sure, that our impact is aligned with our intention. So if we could ask the, cultural brokers that are here this evening, like, which hat shall we put on you, to come up and have a seat here? Yeah. First of all, I just want to say a really deep thank you to all of you for being willing to join us and add so much richness to this experience this evening. Really appreciate it. It was sort of a dream vision we had, and I emailed Linda this week, and she's like, here's who's coming. And I'm like, yes! So the first thing I'd like to do, and we'll pass the mic down, is to ask you to do the introduction that you gave to your group. So I have it here. You don't need to do the questions, but just the, since not everybody heard your answers. And if you want to add anything here, like what you're doing now, or...
Thank you, Annie. So my name is Mahmoud Hassan. I was born in Somalia. I have lived in Maine since 2001. Part of that time I lived in Lewis and Auburn area. The rest in Portland. Majority of the time actually in Portland. I am a parent, and I have 2 daughters in Prasamskat school. So I'm invested now in, not just as a panelist here, but as a community member here as well. I also have 4 of my older children actually went through Prasamskat. Now they're in middle and high school. Languages, I speak, of course, Somali language, my first language, Arabic language, and English, and hoping to learn some more.
I am Betsy Baskimeshi. I was actually born here and sent back to Cuba when I was about 3 days old. And then we were able to come back. Mostly grew up in New York City. What's the other one? I speak Spanish. I'm working on my Portuguese, basic Hebrew, and I do not live here, but I work here as a parent community specialist, and I am a parent as well. I think I'm good. Good.
Thank you. So I am Thuy. I was born in Vietnam, and I came to America in 1995. And I can speak English and Vietnamese. And I am a parent. I have 2 children. 18 and 16. So one kid, the 18 years old, is going to leave our nest. So at the end of August, it will feel an empty nest.
My name is Josephine. I was born and raised in Burundi. I live in Old Orchard Beach. I speak Kirundi, Kinyarwanda, French, and English, and still learning English and Swahili. I'm a parent. I have 3 children, and I can say I'm a community member because I spend the whole day in Poland.
And your kids go to school?
Yeah. My 2 kids attend Reiki school, and my 3rd one is joining Reiki next year.
It looks like an exam, so I can see the questions. Hi, my name is Ahmad Jassim. I am from Iraq, originally from Iraq. I was born and raised in Iraq, and I worked in Libya and Syria and a little bit in Jordan. And I live here in Portland since 2014. I speak Arabic and some English, and actually I'm 3 of these, so I'm a parent for 4 kids. I have all levels of schools. I have elementary, middle, and high school, and university, college, I mean, yeah. And as I said before, I have no questions.
But I'll come here and use it, and then we'll send it back this way, which puts you on the spot first. So I wanted to ask each of you if you can think of any examples, no matter how small, of places where you think that a cross-cultural community is working. It can be a moment, an event like this, or an overall situation, anything that comes to mind, places where you think we can find hope for how we move forward and how we, I remember one great question I learned about writing. What's the best thing you can tell a writer? What they're doing well so they can do more of it. So that's the idea. What are we doing well, tiny or large, so that we can do more of it?
Maybe I can start with this event. It's very important for us as a community members and families, new families here. Because I worked with 2 non-profit organizations here in Portland. One of them is Portland Empowered, and we did many space share cafe, and it was very good for our families and our communities. And because we are new here, I count myself as very new here, and I learned many things about this event before and now. And I was looking for friendship with anyone because I want to be a very good member, community member here, and I want to serve because in the end I want to feel safe where I have been here or anyone. So maybe I can think about something else later. If you
anyone?
Really? I think Ahmed brought a good point in saying events like this, and I think events like this with our younger people, because I think when we get kids, interested in just trying to share a little bit about each other, I think eventually it trickles down to parents. My daughter is in high school in Kennebunk. She is the only Spanish student in the whole school. So she kind of created a, what she calls a culture club. And it's kind of amazing. It started out with just her and her best friend, and now we're up to like 15 kids. And they're really interested in learning about, you know, when she first said, oh, my mom is from Cuba, because people asked her. When I went to parent-teacher conferences, they were like, where is your mom from? Because I'm a little darker than her, I look different than her. And people were actually interested, wanting to learn what language they speak, what kind of food do we eat. Everybody automatically was like, oh, you guys like spicy food, right? And tacos. And Caitlin's kind of like, no, that's like not us at all. It's very different, but it's not spicy, it's not tacos, it's not enchiladas, it's not carne asada like Taco Bell does. You know, so she's been able to really educate a lot of the students there. I mean, it's still a work in progress, but I think if we do stuff with our younger people, I think it will expand, because I think our younger people tend to be a little more open sometimes than us grown-ups.
I think I kind of missed the instruction piece on the.
What's an example of something you've seen that is a positive experience of cross-cultural, cross-racial community?
I think we see a lot of positive interactions across cultures and communities, despite the differences. And I say that because cultural communications in every culture, even the culture I come from, and interactions are different. And sometimes it's not equal, is what I'm trying to say. It's not 100% equal for even a community that speaks the same language that might look alike or even sound alike. And I was telling Sean earlier, where I come from, ethnic, racial identity is not the same as sitting here. Over there, you might look the same, sound the same, actually have the same traditional religious beliefs and customs. But what matters, the affiliation is more like paternal lineage, and that is the determinant. For an example, when people ask you in my culture, where are you from? They mean where your lineage or clan is from. So I can, for example, count my lineage: Mahmoud, Hassan, Ali, Abdi. Hassan is my father. Ali is his father. Abdi's great-grandfather, and Muhammad Nur Ilmi, up to sometimes 30 or so. Some people even do more. And then I will say where you link up, who is closer to me than who, and they will vote with that. Whoever is close, even by one paternal lineage, I should say, even if they don't share the same territory, same interest, they will just vote. They will go in wars. They will go whoever is closer. So they say, oh, the Abkado, which means, no, actually, that's totally wrong. Said it differently. So that is what it was. So they say, hi, how are you? And you get to meet with the person. Oh, yeah, look the same, sound the same. We come from the same area. But then where you come from, and then they will say, oh, this person comes from far away. Even though they're not far away, they're right next door. But their lineage is farther away from me than the other person out there. And that's sort of it was. But for me, I feel it was a blessing for me to travel and see different, brand new culture to me. It's still, even though I'm here in the States now for 22 years and counting, had all of my children here, I'm learning a new thing every day. I work professionally as a linguist, language interpreter, a cultural broker, but at the same time encountering a new thing every day. An example, if I can tell you, I had one day I was talking about someone, and a friend of mine at Portland Public Schools, even though I'm no longer there, multilingual officer, and I said, I told somebody off. And you know what I meant? So to stay off, to not come, not like it's over, not in a, like, I'm mad at you. And they said, oh, you did really? And I said, what do you mean? And they told him to not come, it's over. So you told him off, that means you yelled at them. I'm learning. So I am learning a brand new thing every day. I will always be learning in this culture, I believe, because I grew up in that culture and I'm more familiar with that culture. But my hope is to, that my kids do not see any difference. They feel they belong here, that they feel their culture is here, that they don't have to feel they're out of place. I'm not saying I'm really out of place. I am still very proud of this community. I'm very proud of Portland and the United States, to be honest with you. I think we're doing a tremendous job, an amazing job. Every community has a challenge, but I think when any cultural difference of biases or discrimination, to me, it bothers, it's difficult when it's institutionalized, where the institutional law or something tells you, we have these hours, you don't have it. But I think other biases they happen. I guess we should not just be okay with it and live with it. We should always continue working on making things better for everybody and more equitable. But I really cannot claim that everything was equal in my culture either. It was not. There was biases and stuff, even with people within the same culture. So, sorry, I've taken too long.
Tui or Josephine, did you think of anything you wanted to add?
Yes. Me too. So, yes, I thought of something. I remember that I think that it is food for the soul. That is something that everybody really wants. I remember that some years ago there was a Vietnamese musician. Actually, he was a singer, and he came. It was at Longfellow. So there were Vietnamese families, children, and there were American families and their children, and we had a great night. And also the other thing, Thích Nhất Hạnh, he's a Buddhist monk, and he liked to talk about medication. He's been reading so many books, and he had a retreat in Vermont at a Green Mountain. So there were Americans, there were Vietnamese, and everybody went there, did not carry any boundaries between them. And when I saw that smiley faces everywhere in every direction, and so I thought that was a great event that would bring everybody together, and I would like to see that again.
Yes, I would say that beside these events of Parent University, there is something that I like, especially in Portland public schools, when they have family nights and schools. That's where you see all the parents there, immigrant parents and American parents, where they come together and get to know each other and sharing dinner. So it's really a good thing that I noticed since I started working with Portland Public Schools.
And I've observed, just when I've walked into the office, I think that the multilingual program is an extraordinary example of creating multiracial community. I always feel a little jealous and envious, like I wish I could live in this world. And I watch all of you, the staff and the cultural brokers, and there's such deep relationships that have been built, and you're all working together towards a same mission. So I think that you have, as a community of people and as a program and as a part of the Portland Public Schools, that you have contributed deeply to the enriching of the greater community. And as a resource, I don't know how many of you, but they are available to help us. I've called several times. I need help with this book. I need some actors for Portland Stage Company, and It's just, it's an extraordinary resource. So,
Haven't even been in the kitchen.
what's that?
You haven't even been in our lunches.
No, I haven't. Can I get invited to the lunches? How do I do that?
That's where it happens.
Okay. Mahmoud sort of started us in that direction, but just briefly, if anything is on the top of your mind now, what are the obstacles to creating multicultural community? You said institutionalized bias, but add something else.
I think what I was trying to say is, and I didn't answer what everyone else alluded to, what can create that connection. And I think definitely meeting people in a setting outside of professional space, school, work, even though, as was already mentioned, Multilingual office is an amazing place. I miss it a lot. It's a fun place to be. I think, and I remember now when we invite to each other's homes, and all the cultural differences are still there, but we are coming from the same office. We are friends. We know each other very well, and but it feels that more intimate, a closer sort of linking and meeting. And it's family, yeah. And I know in my culture, for an example, we still say, I don't want to get too close to the dog because I want to be worshiping him and praying there later on. And I'm pretty sure that is, if it's someone that doesn't know me, kind of hurtful. It would sound to some people like, I don't like your dog, or disrespectful. But for people who know me, they totally know that I am not that type of person who would disrespect someone like that. And it's still, even though that is, there's some differences here and there still, but I think that kind of builds that relationship. I guess a playground, maybe a meeting at the playground, having the kids play with, inviting each other to birthday parties, even though we were talking at my table about some of the things that can come up. But I think in terms of barriers, the language is a big deal. When someone is not 100% sure, I am still, sometimes I miss some of the nuances I said, and someone might say, oh, this person did not get it or did not get me. I know that some people who would say, jokes, for example, if someone misses a piece in the joke, and someone automatically, this person is kind of slow or does not get it, and it's totally not, that is just a language. But I think the barrier definitely is big. The biggest part is the language. So.
He took that one, now you have to think of something else.
Oh boy. I think fear on both ends. I think people just are afraid or don't want to offend someone. So I think I think that sometimes can interfere. So, somebody wants to have, let's say, a sleepover. I know, like, for us in my culture, we don't do that, right? So, like, they don't know how to go about asking, do you do that? Or they just ask me, and then it is like that awkward moment that you guys had. I think as far as, I think as far as language, I'm in the same boat as the rest of my coworkers. I sometimes miss subtleties, or I don't get tone right sometimes. So I usually will say to people, listen, I sometimes am saying what is coming in my brain, and it might come off offensive. I don't mean it. I've learned to kind of say that because, sometimes it comes out a little rough. So I think it's fear. It's fear of making a mistake and offending someone and hurting someone's feelings. I mean, it's coming from a good place, but I think we all have to work on, it's okay to make that mistake. It's okay to just say, I don't know, can you tell me? Is this okay? So that's... You got it.
I think that in my culture, people are afraid that we do not have a lot of commons with Americans or with other cultures. And Vietnamese do believe that Americans have a broad knowledge of a lot of things. And in Vietnam, the way that we grew up in our society, we could not talk about politics. So when Vietnamese meet people from different countries and they started to talk about politics, and people in my culture will not talk about that. They prefer not to talk about politics. And I think that it is because of we grew up in a communist country. We were not allowed to talk. And I remember that my uncle was captured and killed. And for years, I asked my mother, and my mother always said that she didn't know who killed my uncle. But when she got older, she got dementia, and she one time did say that VC killed him. And so that is the thing that Vietnamese do not think that they don't have a lot of commons with the people from different countries. So they are afraid to go to an event like that, or they are afraid that there are not a lot of Vietnamese there. And also, in my culture, if you invite someone, you need to do it 2, 3, or 4 times. If you just invite one time, they think that you just do that because you want to be polite, but you don't really mean it. So, and I have some friends, and even though they have very high education in America, they still think that way. And they are in a Vietnamese community, Thai Vietnamese community. And a lot of time I just tell them that, no, don't think that, don't assume that. If some Americans invite you to an event or invite you over to their house, just go, don't think about anything. And that's how, because no matter what, you are here, you need to blend in with the culture. Thank you.
Can I say one more thing really quick? Sorry. I thought of one other thing that is a common thing. I mean, it happened to me growing up, and it happens to a lot of the Spanish speakers. The fear on our end is you feel you're going to lose yourself. You're going to lose who you are. It makes you less Cuban or less Honduran or less, and that is a fear. I mean, I remember growing up, and my mother would say to me, you're becoming too American. And even now, like, my mother will say to me, you're getting too American. Why would you do something like that? And it's tough, when you're living in between two cultures. So sometimes I think with us on this end, it's that fear of losing who you are, and it's hard to kind of, so that was my, there you go, sorry.
My culture is open to everybody. Whoever is a guest, you get the best, which means there is no fear of the other. So even if you are a newcomer in the country or in the neighborhood, they will know that you are new. They will ask you who you are, welcome you, and if like you are renting next to, renting to new people, they will always welcome you and want to know you. So which means we have a say that your neighbor is your relative, because you may have your relatives who live far away from you. So now your neighbors are then, your new family members. So mostly in my community are open to any culture. They can communicate with anybody. But the only difference is that our culture are very, I can say, reserved. You don't talk about yourself. or describe yourself. Like if they ask you, "Oh, can you talk a little bit about you?" People in my community are not raised as individuals. They are raised up as a community. So you will find that many people don't know how to describe them or say who they are or what they like. So, but what I liked most especially Portland became my second family. So what I noticed when you meet somebody on the street and you just say hi and you start talking about the weather and then you go on and you get all the information from that person. So from people from East Africa, you won't get that much information from them. So that was the first thing that surprised me. I said, why these people talk everything about their husband, their kids? First, especially what you ate. That's
Sorry to interrupt you, but
No.
I would say the Somali culture, even though we're still East Africa, they will freely give information. Freely.
Especially for Burundians and the Rwandese. No, you can't even talk about what you ate. But our people, they love to learn from many other cultures, and they feel like they feel at home in Maine.
I think they said all things, so maybe I can't add anything, but I can start with your end. Even at schools, we educated when you want to make a conversation with someone, you just ask him about the weather. So you just say, what a wonderful day, or such a beautiful day, or such a sunny day. So you can get more information after that, and you can start on. So, and maybe I can talk about two things. It looks different, but I think we have the same with these cultures because we're grown up with the same environment. I mean, physical environment and social environment, especially with Somalian or maybe Spanish, because we have the same conditions, with same traditions maybe, or almost the same, and we always can do everything with food. So if you want to do anything kind or nice for someone, you can offer food or just invited him to a dinner or lunch or even breakfast. So you can make friendship with that, with this. And I just remember something, I read it before. So it's like a story as a poem. So there's a conversation between two people. One of them is white man and the other is, they call it color. So the color one said, why you call me color while you get angry, you get red. And when you get sad, you get black. Or when you feel happy, you will get maybe pink or something like that. So you are the color, not I am. So you have all colors. And when I wrote this, I focused on the words. Sometimes words hurts. Sometimes words breaks. So the good things when you want to break ice or want to make a relationship with the others, you have to come without bad idea about the others. So you can discover by yourself. You can catch everything, every information from this guy or from this woman or this kid. So you just say hi and you will get anything you want. So, thank you.
That was extraordinary. I'm with you, still learning. I wish everybody in Portland could have heard that. So we have about 20 minutes before we agreed that we would wind this up. And here's my idea, and you can say what you think. We were going to have more discussion, but because this was so rich, I wanted us to be able to hear all of this. So what I'd like to suggest is to get in groups of 3 or 4 and come up with one concrete vision of something that we could do to create community. We had them all right there. Or anything else that you can come up with together that you think would move us forward. It can be a very small thing, or a program, or something that you would do daily, whatever you imagine, and see if you can come up with something together in that group of 3 or 4, and imagine what you would do for concrete steps to make something like that happen. I just want to get some vision going here. And then when I'll give you 10 minutes to do that. That's really short. This is just a warm-up. And then on the piece, there are pieces of paper, and I'll come around with markers. And if you can just write a word or a phrase about that would describe it, and at the end we're going to have like a minute each to share the vision. What do you think, Grace? Okay, she agrees. All right. So thank you all so much. Wow. All right. If we're ready, I'm going to come around with, or Grace is going to come around with a microphone and hand it to someone. So we need a spokesperson from your group to tell us in 1 minute what the idea was and give us a short description.
Anyone ready?
They look great.
Our group, our message was just ask. Just ask. Just extend an invitation. Just say hello. Just take baby steps. And if it doesn't go great the first time, see it as a learning opportunity and do it again. Just take baby steps and just ask, and always include food. No one's going to say no to that one.
Can you hold up your posters so people can see? Visual aid.
We were talking about a community garden, both based in schools, but also in other parts of the community, as a way to have an ongoing way for people to interact, as opposed to like a one-time event. And we talked about how important it would be from the outset to have co-ownership, not have it be something that's presented by, for example, the white PTA, but have it be developed by a cohort of diverse people from the outset, with activities that aren't necessarily language-based and with input about what would be grown and things like that.
That will also end in food.
Thank you. So we loved what you said, read the world you want. We talked about having book lists for kids, maybe a summer reading list of experiences of kids and in different cultures, living here or not living in America, but for parents as well, so that the parents could read the books too, because I think half the time it's the parents that are not aware of these books. and then also talking about it. So meeting at different times during the day, in the evening, whenever, making different times so that different groups can meet at different times. And then the kids can talk, and then the parents can talk about the book. And then as it happens, like here tonight, you start talking about other stuff. And so we love that idea. A friend of mine had mentioned the idea of books as windows and books as mirrors, and that kids need both. So we would like those kind of books to be on the list. And sort of piggybacking on this books idea is Portland Stage has a program where they act out scenes from different books. Play Me a Story, is that what it's called?
Well, they do that for children, but then they'll also act out scenes from books to promote them. They recently did one for A Piece of the World, Christina Baker Klein, where they acted out some scenes from her book as a way of promoting the book.
Oh, cool. So yeah, so ours is very book related. We're some readers on this table, I guess. And I just wanted to say one thing that we were talking about as well, which is the idea of cultural exchange versus cultural tourism. Because my fear is that sometimes when we learn about other cultures, it then becomes about them putting on a show for, white people that this is, and that's it. And we wanted to go beyond that because I think we all as a community deserve it.
Thank
you. We talked about a few different things. One was the idea of mentoring for students across backgrounds and cultures, even if it's older students and with younger students. Continuing to work on diversifying the workforce, so that mentoring piece might be especially important as in this interim phase when we still have a lot of mostly white teachers. Extending our personal networks to include more people who are not like us. Whole idea of knocking on your neighbors' doors and knowing your neighbors, and we talked about the idea of block parties and just building more connections with your neighbors.
Well, I know what I want after this evening. I want a panel like that with a large audience where where we have an hour for people to ask questions. Like all the things you've worried about and wondered about and didn't know what to do or how to handle it, and to hear from a diverse panel like that about what would be helpful and how we can all move forward together. So I'll pass that on to Parent U, because that could be so exciting. I want to call all of your attention to a website, imyourneighborbooks.org, which is a project I co-founded with Kirsten Cappy and another author who, and it also has a welcoming library. It's an online searchable database of close to 200 now books representing the contemporary immigrant experience. Picture books through young adult novels, in English, published in the United States. They take place all over the world. Some of them begin in home countries, some are about the journey, some are about arrival, some are about adjustment, some are about multi-generations of the immigrant experience. It's an extraordinary resource, and you can find that book list you're looking for there and build it. You can search it by theme, by origin, by group, by age group, etc. We have the books are all in English and some of them are bilingual, but there isn't a large collection yet of books in other languages. Thank you all so much. This is an extraordinary experience. When we started talking about it, I'd say it completely exceeded my expectations. And I hope it's planted seeds in everyone's mind about what's possible and what we might do next, and how we continue to create what we saw here tonight. Thank you so much.